So let me ask you this. What drew you to books in the first place? I mean, why are you a writer? There's so many easier things to do with your life to be happy. Why are you doing this?
I mean, like you said, I really I can't not do it. I mean, like I know because I've tried. Like I started writing prose at least in probably about 2007, and I'd write until I wrote like a novel that I trunked. But after that, I was just like, you know what, maybe I shouldn't do this. And I think I lasted maybe 7 months not writing anything before it just like it was like before I even knew it, I'm just kind of writing out notes like, well, what if this is this kind of a story? And then within a month or two, I'm back to writing short stories and thinking about a novel and doing all this other stuff.
That's cool. Yeah, it's like your brain just goes
I
there.
mean, I guess it's because I need this sort of creative release that I just can't get in other ways, and I need this sort of feeling of self expression that I just don't. As much as I love talking with people and engaging with people on a conversational level, it's like you just can't get the same experience as sort of like rooting around in your head like, okay, so we're in a swamp and like who's in the swamp and like what is their name, are they male or female, are they in a boat, are they in a house, and just like you're and like it starts on that surface level, and then pretty soon you're like thinking of like your own experience and trying to apply it to the narrative, and it's just, yeah, there's just a lot going on that I can't really express or like exercise without writing it down.
Right, right. Do you like writing? Do you like the process of writing, the act of writing?
Um,
Because that's
it's a
it,
loaded
man. It's hard.
question. Yeah. Sometimes, yes. I think to be a novelist, you sort of have to still work on days when you're not in the mood because it is such a large word count. Like if I was just a short story writer, and I have been before, you can get away with like taking a couple days off or even taking a week off, and then you just go back and you can still get a 5,000, 6,000 word story written in a couple of weeks that way. But with a
Right.
novel, yeah, it's going to be take you a very long time if you're working, once a week or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean it's weird. Sometimes I remember Theodore Sturgeon, the great science fiction writer. He said, "I don't like writing, but I like the act of having written." Like, and it's almost like exercising. Like we hate exercise, but we love the day after we've exercised, where we're feeling good and we feel like we spent our time well that day. And
Yeah, I
so
think of
it's
it like chores almost. Like I don't really like doing the dishes, but I like the feeling of, I wake up in the morning and go to make a glass of tea, and it's like the kitchen is clean. I'm like, oh, I like
yeah,
this. So
yeah. Yeah, it's a weird thing. And, the idea of sitting alone in a room, probably for no gain, there's probably no, great brass ring at the end of all this. It's
probably
a
not.
weird way to spend your time, but I guess we have to do it. I'm the same way. I just want to tell my stories. I want to put what's inside my head outside my head. That's basically, it's as simple as that. And of course I get a little bit of an ego rush. Let's not pretend there's no
Oh
ego
yeah, no,
rush.
there is that. I like to joke with people when I was writing the novel that I trunked. I was like, I don't know. When I was 50 pages in, I was like, I'm gonna be the next Clive Barker or whatever. I'm gonna get my big movie. And like, there's, it's like not realistic, but it's also like, well, like what's the harm in dreaming?
Yeah, I mean it's still worth doing, even if you
Because
get
it's, yeah,
very
it's like if it makes you write the novel, then like, does it matter what the motivation was?
right. Well, it's we're seeking happiness here. Writing a novel obviously makes me happy and makes you happy,
Yeah, it
and
does.
that's what we're doing is we're seeking satisfaction. Um, but let me ask you another loaded question. Why horror? Why not, non-genre fiction,
Um, That is a good
or what?
question because
Science.
I don't really know now. Like, I don't really know. I all I can tell you is I've tried to write things that are not genre, and I don't get very far. There is something about just like darker themes, maybe not even just horror, but just like I would always have to write something that just goes to like a very heavy kind of dark place that I don't get the same kind of um I don't get the same kind of satisfaction of just like I'm sure I could write a novel where it's like I don't know, a guy named Jake and he lives in Dallas and he decides to start working at a bar or and then he meets a woman and they but like if I was trying that same sort of narrative, I think naturally I would be like, okay, so he's working at the bar and then he witnesses a murder in the alley. Like that's just where my mind goes. I don't know why. I'm a very anxious person, so that's probably a lot of it. Um, and I'm a bit of a
Yeah, no, I
depressive,
feel.
so that may be part of it. But I mean,
Uh,
like an actual answer, because I sort of hate the. I'm not a huge fan of when people try to imply like, "Oh, you write horror because you're mentally ill." I'm like, I don't think that holds up because I've met so many horror writers or dark fiction writers, weird fiction writers, and the majority of them are very like cool, calm, collected, and stable.
Absolutely.
So I
Even
don't
boring.
like the answer of just like, well, I'm mentally ill. That's why I write about people dying.
Well, it's just more fun to me. I mean, even as a reader, like when I read your story, Sunny Village, that the kind of the picture you painted of the severed hand still grabbing the railing of the high rise, and it's instantly galvanizing. I mean, you instantly just you feel your own adrenaline kind of pulse a little bit when you read that, and it's more fun than reading about a guy who's having trouble in his life and he's having trouble paying the bills and he accepts a job as a house sitter and we feel his interior drama, but there's no real happening that really sets it apart.
I
It's
mean, I will
I
say
like
there are plenty of people that are considered literary writers where I can read them and enjoy them, but it is like, it'll be people like Kelly Link or Dan Sean or people where it's like they're technically not writing horror, but or someone like Joyce Carol Oates, where it's like they're technically not writing horror right now, but they're operating in a mode that is so close to writing horror that I can appreciate it.
right. Well, that's what I thought was so great about Nathan Ballingrud's
Ballingrud, yeah.
book, um, was that he sort of found that sweet spot between contemporary dramatic fiction, like almost like a Raymond Carver kind of
Yeah.
writer, and Stephen King, where it's like Raymond Carter, say Carver with werewolves, and it's great. It's great because of that, because you really do care about these people, and the introduction of this inexplicable supernatural thing into their lives just sets the mess of their lives off into a completely separate direction. And it's never about the monster. It's never about the werewolf or the sea monster or whatever they find. It's always about them, which I find is the real true brilliance of his vision. And so I love Nathan. He lives in my town, so we've met. And
Oh, all right. I was going to say North Carolina. I know that
yeah,
he lived in Louisiana at one point. He was born in Massachusetts, but
I think he did live in New Orleans. He worked on like oil rigs and stuff off the coast, and was one of those two-fisted oil rig guys, and but no, he's just a sweet teddy bear of a man.
I met him.
Lives here
Yeah,
in Asheville.
when I was hanging out with Matthew Bartlett at I forget which convention now. I had lunch with him and Matt and Dale. Is it Dale Bailey? I think that's his name. Yeah, he's a
Yeah, I
nice
think it
guy.
is. Yeah, yeah. And that just goes back to those mild-mannered, librarians who are just in their daytime job. They're very quiet and, sort of introspective, and then they write the most intense, crazy, violent, demented stuff,
I mean, I think of my best example is Jack Ketchum, who I'm a big fan of, and like he goes more transgressive than most. Like he will just really go for it. But I met him a lot. Like he used to go to this convention called Rock and Shock in Massachusetts in Worcester, and he'd be there like almost every year. So like for almost a decade, I would like see him, once a year. And he's just like the most normal, relaxed, kind man. But you
Yeah.
read his prose, and it's like the harshest stuff. Like, so it just kind of it was like that. He's like my main example for like no, like it doesn't hold up that if someone writes really hard to swallow fiction that they are a bad kind of like psychotic or whatever like negative
Right.
person.
Right. Sometimes they're teddy bears, you
Yeah, a
know?
lot of the time they seem more relaxed. It might just be because they're like getting all that negativity out of their head, where it's like, I mean, personally, sometimes I get more afraid of people that just like seem a little too happy and they're like, oh, I'm an accountant. And you're like, okay, but like, what's really happening?
Yeah, I mean, they go off to be these like weekend warriors in the woods and stuff, you know? I think it was Voltaire who said, be, something I'm paraphrasing, but he said, be, mild and quiet in your daily life so you can be crazy and bizarre in your art, And
I mean,
I
yeah,
think
I'm
that's kind of,
very unassuming. I have been most of my life. I've been selectively mute for lots of times in my like not that I can't talk. It's just I won't. I used to be in high school. I'd like spend hours just not speaking to anyone. And I don't even mean just in
wow,
classes. I mean just like the day.
wow.
So I'm very unassuming and mild mannered. So I think that is part of the like when I write a story. It's like I'm gonna do all the things that like I just don't do in my daily life. Like I'll write about someone very obnoxious and loud.
No, that works. That works. I have to say that like I'm not drawn to a lot of horror or weird fiction. There was about 10 years when I didn't write horror or weird fiction at all because actually my wife was involved in like a workplace shooting.
Oh,
So
Jesus.
we had horror in our daily lives. Like we had horror. We didn't need to read it. We had it. And so for about 10 years I was like out of the scene and not really even paying attention to it or needing to be there at all. And like that gore kind of stuff. I really came to sort of see that, kind of look side eyed at that because it was like gore. Why do you need gore in your life? Like, what are you missing that you need gore?
Yeah, I guess I
Um,
have a complicated relationship with that sort of thing because with a lot of, um, my partner
I
likes
mean,
some of those more over the top films, but it is like you're sort of operating at like, this is like a cartoon. It's like it's not supposed to be real, but there is that disconnect where I'm like, well, violence is real though. So I guess I'm always
it is.
struggling with that in my own fiction where I will be very violent. Like I can't pretend I'm not, but it's at least violence for a purpose where it's like when I write it, it's like it's even if it's funny, it's not necessarily cartoonish. Like there will be consequences. Like if someone loses a hand, the hand is gone. They're not just going to be instantly walking around like smiling and laughing like that
Right.
that is a permanent injury.
Yeah. Well, good, because that's what life is. Life has consequences,
Yeah, I
and
mean,
if
I don't always bring this up, but we went on a road trip, my partner and I, across Route 66, and it was one of the best vacations I've ever experienced. It was a lot of fun. We drove old Route 66, saw all these kitschy tourist attractions. We ended in Vegas, and we ended up doing an extra day in Vegas because I don't know. There was some cave we wanted to go to, but it was like the road was like it was like literally a dirt road, and we rented like a Nissan Versa or something like very low, uh, like a 4-cylinder, not much power, so it really couldn't handle a dirt road. I mean, this was
right,
like a really bumpy dirt road. So we had an extra day in Vegas, and it was I'd never been to Vegas. I had fun. It's Vegas. It's pretty over the top, but and then we had the last night, and we got on the plane, and we flew back home, got in late, and I went to sleep, and I didn't think of anything of it. And I woke up and checked my phone, and there were all these messages, and some of them were from strangers asking, "Are you okay?" And I was, I'm like half awake, so I'm like, "Yeah, I'm fine." Like, we got in sort of late, and my mom's asking, "Are you okay?" And my dad, and I'm like, what happened? And then I checked the news, and we had left tops like 3 hours after the Vegas shooting, where 50 people died at that country western thing. So that wasn't great.
Yeah.
Just like, and I
Wow.
wasn't even technically, I was there, but I wasn't there when it happened. But just like the head fuck of that is like, oh god.
Jeez, man. Talk about real horror, you know?
Yeah, and I mean, I've written about mass shootings and shootings because I'm like, that's terrifying. Like, I don't know. I don't like to write about them. Like it's not like I get any pleasure out of it. It's just they're a part of. They just happen.
I'll ever
Um,
write about that.
yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to derail anything. Um,
No, no, no. I mean, do you think you'll ever write about that one incident?
uh the in particular, yes, but
Yeah.
it would have to be relatively autobiographical. Like I had an idea in mind where it's basically like it's sort of like what my experience was like in Vegas with my partner. Maybe different names, but like very similar where it's just fun and all that, and then have the very end of the story like describe like just the events occurring because that was very much my experience of it was like just really surreal. Like I wasn't technically there, but I was close enough that it's like it makes me think like, what if our flight got delayed? What if we were there for an extra couple hours and we felt like walking the strip one more time? Like it's scary.
Okay. Yeah.
So I would probably write it mostly autobiographical because I just wouldn't. I don't know that I'd feel comfortable making it too fictional because it is so oddly personal.
Yeah, no, I hear you. And also you want to honor the experiences and memories of those who fell, and you kind of have to take that seriously. You sort of have to be reverent about that stuff a little bit because it's not funny. It's not,
No,
it's,
yeah, I mean, and it is weird because I've written, in I have a novella where there's spoiler, but it ends with like a mall shooting, but it's not based on a specific real event, and so even
yeah,
though it wasn't great to write, like I just felt like the narrative needed it, but like I don't have a real world analog per se that I'm tying it to, so I felt a little more not comfortable, but I guess just able to do it. But if it
right.
was based on like a real, I don't know that I'd ever completely fictionalize like a real shooting. I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah, no, I get it. I get it. I mean, the horrors of World War One were so awful that you had so many brilliant writers that did not write about it. I mean, think about C.S. Lewis and J.R.R. Tolkien and people like that. I mean, Tolkien was in World War One and he chose instead to write about Middle Earth. And of course, I think some of that seeped into Lord of the Rings, that sort of um, the violence and all the destruction and the evil kind of perspectives. But at the same time, he never really addressed, at least to my knowledge, he never addressed that event. And there's almost like nothing you can say about it. It's too big to write about. It's too awful to write about.
Yeah, I mean
You
that's
know.
sort of why I have a very love hate relationship with genre that likes to incorporate Nazis because on the one hand it's Indiana Jones, it's this, it's that, but on the other hand it's like it's the fucking Holocaust and like it feels sort of weird to be like, and there's werewolves. It's like, I get it. I'll even watch it. But sometimes I'm like, I don't know how I feel about this.
Yeah, no, it's horrible. I got the chance to go to Dachau one time in southern Germany, and
Yeah.
it was pretty horrible. I did the tour, and we they and part of the tour they actually let you go inside the gas chambers,
Oh,
and
Jesus.
you're basically in this room that's about as big as somebody's bedroom. If it were pretty big, it's a little bigger than a bedroom, and there's still like claw marks on the walls where people were like literally clawing at the walls. And once you've done something like that, you don't want to write about Nazis. It's just too immediate. You're just like, okay, let's write about werewolves or something. Let's not write about Nazis because it's too intense. It's like going back to that workplace shooting of my wife's where it was like the horror is real. We don't need to make up horror at this point because
Right.
it's real. So it's very what's the word I'm looking for? It's very sobering, you know.
It's very sobering. Um, yeah, I mean, there's not all that much. I mean, one of the reasons I like horror or genre fiction in general, I think more than just kind of straight literary fiction, is that there's an element that is not, you can suspend disbelief, but there is always an element that's like not real. It's like there are
Right,
monsters. Monsters are largely known not to be real.
right. They're imaginary.
And I think you can
Yeah,
mix the two sometimes, but it's like, I don't, I'm not always I'm usually not in the mood to read a novel that's just kind of like bare bones, like this is somebody's lab. I mean, there are exceptions, obviously. I'm, I know this is a total tangent, but someone like Stuart Onan, for instance, he has this great, uh, it might be a short novel, might be a novella called Last Night at the Lobster.
yeah,
And it is one of my exception to the rule type things where it's like the plot is literally it's a man that manages a Red Lobster, and it's the last night he's going to be managing it because the branch or the restaurant is closing down. And my friend Tom Breen told me about it. He's like, it's this great book, and my response, and most people would think this too, is why would I want to read about a guy managing a Red Lobster? Like, doesn't that sound
right.
really boring? That kind of a thing.
Right.
And then you read it and it's like so well written. You're like, I can't believe how much I love this book. That's literally just a guy that manages a Red Lobster.
That's cool.
But
No,
it's like very, the characters are very real and there's interpersonal stuff. And um,
I'd
so
like to
that
read
is
that
like,
book.
that's
Right.
all my examples always have an exception.
Well, it's true. I mean, sometimes these imaginary monsters are cathartic. You have the mummy, and things like that, and it's fun to work out issues with the mummy that you don't want to work out with your stepdad
Right.
who
Yeah.
hits you. So sometimes it's good to kind of throw these things into a supernatural realm, and you can still work out a little bit of you know psychosocial things with your novel, and give it real kind of nutrition and some something to really bite into without it actually being just throwaway. And I think that's kind of the best of all worlds is when you have one foot in genre where you are writing about a mummy or a witch or a Frankenstein or a werewolf, and then on the other hand you're really addressing something serious, like you're addressing domestic violence, or you're addressing say bulimia or self-esteem issues or something like that. And so if you can have both of those at the same time, that's when it really takes off, I think. That's one of the is the reason that why Stephen King is so great, is because he can tie in this sort of psychological issues with the exterior vampire coming to get you and make it one story. And I think when you can do that, you've really got something on your hands that's great.
Yeah. I've noticed, I don't know if you've experienced this, but I've noticed I was writing, well, I'm still writing. My current novel is a horror western, and I never, I never have so much of an idea about the characters and what they've been through because I like kind of figuring out as I go along. It seems to work for me. But there's, this it's this family, and they buy this abandoned ghost town in the Red Desert of Wyoming, and they're gonna do like a kind of like a resort themed type of thing. Like it's like the old West ghost town type of getaway type thing.
Sure.
And yeah, you would think like, oh, and it is fun. It's got, but like randomly at, I don't know, page 60, I'm writing a dream sequence, and it's the father, and he's like a child again, and his dad is like punching him in the face and like verbally abusing him, and I'm like, what the hell? Like, but it fit, and I'm like, so stuff like that happens to me sometimes where I'm like, I don't know that everybody would be willing to keep the fact that it's like this guy's from an abuse background, but it was like it suddenly clicked. It was like, well, he got into westerns because he was like a scared little kid, and he liked the whole power dynamic, good versus evil thing in them, and that sort of resonated with him. And then I'm sort of retrofitting it into the rest of the narrative, but it just that stuff happens with me sometimes, like.
That's great.
And I think, yeah, it's like the King thing. It works because it's like, and it's also it's about like real ghosts. So I'm like, well, haunted people, like, works.
No, no, it is. I mean, if you think about the novel for The Shining, as much as I love the movie, the book is great too. But King spends so much time going back into Jack's past, with his teaching, and even his own father who beat his mother, and how his older brothers got out of the house, and he was still a young kid. And so he was haunted, like you say. He was haunted before he ever showed up at the Overlook. And the haunted man is what sticks with us. The
Yeah.
ghosts kind of go, but we're stuck with this haunted man. And I love that about King's work, and I love that about everybody's work who does that.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think, yeah, I'm really drawn to that. I am really drawn to just like
Evil,
good characterization. And I think that is just a blanket, that's a story thing. I don't think it matters what genre it is. If you're writing a good character, it's a good character. But I think
right?
it really works with genre stuff because people aren't always concerned with having their characters really like pop and have like real emotional resonance.
Right.
And to be fair, I'm sure there's plenty of that also in lit fiction and film and movies and whatever. Um, but yeah, no, I think we're on the same page in terms of what we actually like from genre fiction.
Yeah. Yeah, my whole thing is I've always felt like if you could have one foot in genre fiction and one foot in psychological fiction where the character, is character based. It's about a person. Then I think you're going to do really well. That's the kind of the mine of the vein of the gold I'm mining. That's where I'm
Yeah, I mean, I
headed.
think that's a lot of the resonance of someone like Edgar Allan Poe, for instance. It's like, it is sort of over the top gothic fiction, but they're very memorable characters that have like seem like legitimate psychological damage. And
Right.
I think I mean, that's probably not all of it, but I think that may be why his work is still discussed in ways that other writers from that period are not.
Right. Right. I'm not sure H.P. Lovecraft's characters change much.
Well, I
Um,
mean, you know, his was just sheer imagination, like just the amount of stuff that was living in his head.
right.
But yeah, personally, I'm drawn more to character. Even though I like someone like H.P. Lovecraft, I'm more drawn to great characters, somebody who I can like really well care about. So I don't want them to get say killed by a monster.
Who are some of your writers you're reading lately?
Oh man, lately,
Right.
there's a lot. I mean, especially doing the show. Um, let's see. Who am I right? I mean, obviously run the press now, NICTITATIng books. I have a couple of writers that I'm putting out, Maxwell Bauman and Paula Ash. So I'm reading them, obviously, because I have to. I'm doing edits and stuff. But in my spare time, just really a lot of people across the board. I've been doing an audiobook of Megan Abbott, which is a writer I've been trying to get into
I love Megan Abbott.
and I'm doing the one where it's a scientist and she has an old friend who starts to work in her lab. I'm forgetting.
Yeah, it's called Take My Hand.
Yeah, Take My Hand. I'm doing the audiobook of
It's
that, and yeah, I think I got into her through Gillian Flynn, and people were like, if you like Gillian Flynn, you'll like Megan Abbott.
right.
So I really like that so far.
She's great.
What else? Let me see. I really liked Max D. Stanton's collection he had.
Oh my God, I fell for that book so hard. That was. I mean, that book just really showed me the fun of reading again. You know what I mean? Those
Yeah, no,
stories are
he's very
so
like
fun.
it's it's weird to say a word like fun, but yeah, no, it's like the Pigman story is fun. It's like an art terrorist.
It's so much fun. Just every story, every time I would finish one of those stories, I was so tempted to just keep reading because I was having so much fun. Instead of putting the book down and just kind of stewing on the one story and letting it digest, I was like, let's do another one. That was
Yeah,
great.
no, he's very propulsive. I like his
Yeah.
work a lot. Emma Jane Gibbon. I've been
Oh,
sort of reading through Dark Blood Comes from the Feet. Specifically, I started Cellar Door because I remember I interviewed her and she talked about how that's the one that gave everyone nightmares. So I thought I should check this out, and it's great so far.
yeah, I read Cellar Door and flipped over it. It was just fucking.
I mean, I'm like 3 pages in, and I'm already like, I can tell this is going to be something I should not read at night.
It's truly, truly a scary story. Really scary stuff. And I don't scare easily, and it scared the shit out of me. Cellar Door is just. I mean, I'm shivering now just thinking about it.
Yeah, it
It's
reminds
real.
me in a way of I'm a big Kelly Link fan, and she has, I believe the story is called Two Houses, but it's basically it's an interesting conceit, and she has a lot of these interesting conceits. But it's a spaceship, and it's a crew on board a spaceship, and there's like an artificial intelligence type of thing on the spaceship that can basically do like a holodeck thing, like from Star Trek. So it's like
Yeah.
at one point they're like, let's tell each other ghost stories, and so they go around and they're telling these ghost stories, and the ship itself sort of changes into the environment of the setting of whoever's telling the story, and they get to
Yeah.
this one ghost story that's like the main one, and it's about these two houses, and I don't want to give too much away, but it's basically like it's sort of like they're identical houses, but one of them isn't lived in, and it's like an artist has done this for like almost like an art installation, but it's like so there are two identical houses,
Huh.
but it turns out that someone was murdered in one of them, but he won't say which one, and then people move into this one of the houses, and it's just really interesting because it's like it turns into just like not a normal ghost story, but it turns into like a more traditional kind of haunted house type of ghost story. But then you remember like, oh, they're on a spaceship, and it sort of does interesting things with that.
That's cool. Yeah, I've heard good stuff about her. I've never read one of her books.
I would highly recommend Get Into Trouble, which is
Okay.
her collection I started with, which is it's considered literary fiction, but there's so many genre elements. I don't know what to call it. Like it's just fiction.
No, I love it. I'm
Like
all
she'll
about it.
incorporate like zombies, but it's like it's not a horror story. It's just like zombies are in this universe, and then it's just about some guy that works at a convenience store, but there are zombies outside or something like.
It sounds like my jam. I'm
Yeah,
so
it's
into
really
it.
great. But God, in terms of, I shamefully will admit there's a lot of books that I like that I'll read half of and then just kind of like leave on a desk, and then I'll just come back like, oh God, yes, I was reading this, wasn't I? I've been like that with Scott R. Jones's Stonefish, which is a brilliant science fiction
Yeah, I
novel.
read
But
that.
for whatever reason, I got about halfway through, and it's not on him. It was like, I don't know. I had something. I just put it down for whatever reason. Maybe I was going camping and I wanted like an older book that I wouldn't worry about getting dirt on or something. Um, but
Well,
yeah,
that
no,
book,
I tend to read a lot of
it's
genre stuff.
difficult. That book is, it's not an easy read.
There's a lot
It,
of heady stuff. Yeah, there's a lot of like getting into the nature of reality stuff.
yeah, it's heady stuff for sure.
What are you
Yeah.
reading?
I am reading, well, I'm writing now, so I'm reading very carefully because I'm one of those writers who, if you're not, if I'm not careful, like whatever I'm writing will sound like whatever I'm reading. So I have to kind of limit what I'm reading. And right now I'm reading a lot of Clark Ashton Smith, the old weird writer.
Yeah, yeah, I like
Uh,
him.
yeah, he's really great. His Orientalism is just really great. That I'm just a sucker for all that stuff. So I'm reading a lot of research about the Saharan Desert and the Maghreb and how that all happened. I'm reading about southern Spain, which is very Arabic, the Moorish parts of the world. But as far as fiction goes, like some of the stuff I've read lately, have you ever read any S.P. Miskowski?
I have, yeah. I did the audiobook of I think it was Knock Knock.
Oh, Knock Knock is so good.
I count
What
that
did
as reading it too. I mean, I digested it, you know.
That's creepy fucking stuff,
It
man.
is.
You know, you can just really feel the dearth of hope in that book. It just felt like her whole Skaloot cycle to me is just so real because it really captures that lower middle class desperation where everybody is like freaked out and in horror before the horror actually starts,
Oh yeah, like economic horror. Like I think of
Yeah,
something like the original Amityville Horror. One of my favorite scenes in that is like they're not doing so well financially, and someone gives them, I think, a check or something. They get some amount of money, and then the father loses it, and he's just
that's right.
freaking out because he's like, "Where did the money go?" And it's like it's not supernatural, but it adds to the tension of like, did the house take the money? You know, that sort of a
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like the characters, their backs are against the wall when the story starts. They're already in a bad place. And so when things go wrong, you're just like, oh no.
That's what I
Because
like about Ballinger too. Actually, he tends to have characters like that that are also lower, kind of lower middle
that's right.
class, where they're like, you know, I'm not doing well financially, or I have this thing going on in my life, and
Yeah, I've already got problems before the weird stuff starts happening. And I love that stuff. I remember, I think I spoke about this recently on another podcast, but I'll say it again is, back in, when I was younger, Robert Altman did a movie called Shortcuts, which was based on the fiction of Raymond Carver. And Carver, of course, struggled his whole life and he really understood that lower, working class kind of, the desperation. And for the movie, they moved the stories to Los Angeles, and it broke it. It broke the whole back of the story because you can't put those stories in Los Angeles because, frankly, there's too much economic hope in Los Angeles. I mean, there's always a job around the corner. There's always money. There's always a way to get by in LA. And these people in Carver's world were in sort of nowhere, Oregon. They're kind of like their backs against the wall. They've got no other options. And the movie Shortcuts completely falls apart, simply because they changed the location.
I mean, setting is a big thing,
Big
especially in a
time,
visual medium.
big time. Even in fiction, it's big.
Well, I guess I meant especially in a visual medium because you literally are seeing it. But yeah, I mean, and setting is big in every kind of story.
Right, right. That's why we like those lower middle class stories because they're already, I mean, they start at desperate, and then they just go down from there. That's why I was never a big fan of the privileged people in the castle and that kind of thing because it's like, dude, they can just buy their way out, they can just move, just go somewhere else, and but with these economic pressures, these people are trapped, and to bring it back to Knock Knock and SP Miskowski, um, they have nowhere else to go. A lot of these people, they don't have any other options. So when the horror begins, it's almost even worse. You feel for these people. You really want these people to succeed. And when things go wrong, it's really horrifying. So I'm a big fan of hers. And she kind of sticks to the more literary end of things, a little bit more slow burn horror. It's certainly grisly at times, but
Yeah.
it's more about the interiority of things. Who else am I reading right now? Let me get my Kindle out and I'll tell you, but I read ebooks mainly. I read a lot of I'm reading like a lot of fantasy. The book that I'm writing is got some fantastic elements. So I'm reading a lot of Roger Zelazny, specifically Jack of Shadows. Have you ever read Jack of Shadows?
I haven't. No, I haven't read. I haven't read a ton of fantasy or science fiction, even though I like it.
It can be boring if it's like Conan the Barbarian and it's a big dude swinging a
Yeah, that
broadsword.
sort of stuff. I
That's fun.
mean, I can watch it as a film, I think, but I don't know that I'd want to read a whole Conan book.
Yeah, it's super boring because there's no. It's like you were talking
Well, it's like
about.
Superman. It's like how I never really was into Superman because it's like, well, he's literally like an invincible man. Like,
He's the most
what does he
powerful.
have to worry about?
Yeah, I mean, why? Who feels sorry for that guy? But Zelazny does it right though. Zelazny is really good because he gets more psychological. He was a really brilliant writer who could take that genre and turn it into literature. And so he's one of the more interesting writers of fantasy. Let me see what else I've got here. I've got Zelazny. The book I'm working on is a YA-ish book, young
Okay.
adult-ish. So I'm rereading like some Philip Pullman. I'm rereading, what else do I have here? I'm rereading Gene Wolfe, Shadow and Claw. Have you ever read the Claw of the Conciliator, by Gene Wolfe? That's really great.
I
That's a
haven't. It sounds familiar, but I haven't read it. No.
It's about a guy. It's one of those far-flung future stories where it actually is sword and sorcery, but it takes place in the future. So it's sort of
Okay.
an Earth story, and it's really great. And another really great book I'm reading or have read is Steeplejack by A.J. Hartley. Have you ever heard of that one?
I
Steeple.
haven't actually. No.
It's a great story. It's based on this kind of 19th century South African world where, evidently back then they had a lot of people who worked, clock winders and chimney sweeps and people repairing roofs and things really high up. So there was a whole class of people who were sort of like climbers who
Okay.
worked in the tall spaces. And he fashioned this really fascinating young adult fantasy around this culture that existed. And it's just brilliant. I mean, he gets into class, he gets into gender, he gets into history, he gets into race, and it all just becomes this really fascinating story. It's essentially a mystery that is, you know, I think the most fascinating thing about it though is the world it's set in, and he really vividly brings that to life. So AJ Hartley is definitely somebody to seek out.
Yeah, I'll have to check that out. It sounds interesting.
Yeah, he's really great. He's a Shakespearean professor in Charlotte, and so he's got a pretty highfalutin day job. And so he writes really amazing fiction in his off time, and I think he's published like 6 or 7 novels or something like that. But he's more under the radar than he should be. He should be writing full time.
I mean, you and I both know that there are plenty of writers like that where they're just genius, but for whatever reason they aren't as widely read.
It's weird, isn't it?
And it is and it isn't. I mean, so much of commercial art, unfortunately, is just reach and how you get the reach. And it's like, if someone has a big five book, it just makes sense that more people are going to see it than like a middle or smaller press most of the time.
Right.
And that doesn't always mean that the Big Five book is better. It just means that it's in the hands of people that have a wider reach.
That's right. Yeah. There's a big marketing budget. It's like a push
Well,
behind it.
yeah, I mean, like, I don't know how much of this is legit, but like something like a HarperCollins, like, they have money to burn, like, even if the book isn't moving well, they can, like, ostensibly, like, seek out people to write reviews. They can, like, pay X amount of dollars to get, an ad here, an ad there. They can do all these things that most presses just can't afford to do. So
Right. Yeah, it's hard. The marketing is the hardest part
it
of all
really
of it.
is, yeah.
Do you market well? Do you
Oh
market
man, I wish I could tell you yes, but I don't even know. I mean,
how do you market? What's your marketing?
I'm still learning. I mean, I think it's going to be most of my life learning how to market, honestly. I have the basic ones where it's like I'll just share a link on Facebook or Twitter, and I'll share a picture on Instagram, say. Um, I've attempted to do newsletters. I'll admit I haven't had much luck, though I've heard people say, like, if you can get it to work, it's a great resource, the newsletter. I just found it to be just a lot of work for at least initially very little payoff.
Right.
But I'll probably go back to that. Maybe make a new one for nictitating because I had one that was just like my own fiction. And I do these interviews, which I consider cross promotional. Admittedly, it's just because I like talking to artists, so I'd be doing this anyway. But it does, it's called Nictitating Presents for a reason. And
No, I think it's smart. I think you've done that. It's a good job you're doing. You're doing it great.
I mean, it's also just because I've noticed there's not, and I did a podcast before called Miskatonic Musings where I felt that I did it for the same reason. I just feel like there aren't enough venues for genre fiction, like, interviews or like kind of like analytical reviews or anything like that. You'll get kind of more blanket like the book podcast, but they're not genre affiliated, or you might get a genre podcast or a site, but then it's like, it's more on the science fiction end or the fantasy end. So I'm just kind of doing my part to like spread what I'm interested in, which I feel like is both noble and selfish because it's like I'm interested in this stuff already. So me releasing it is almost an afterthought.
Right. That's cool. I admire you. I admire the grit it takes to get other work out there that, isn't widely known, and also work that it's taking time away from your own work
I mean,
too.
I definitely came to a point where when I was finished with Screaming Creatures, I was like, okay, I want to get this out, but then I want to sort of try my hand at editing. I want to see if I can edit, and I want to see if I can, put other people out and kind of, I guess going back to the film kind of analogy, almost be like a producer for like the book, like let's say the writer's the director. I'm almost more the producer, I'm paying for it and I'm like, what kind of cover do you want? And I'm going to help with the marketing, that sort of stuff.
Yeah, no, I love it. I think that's great. Very admirable.
Well, thank
I
you. And I think I'm a big fan of just trying new things. I just think the more stuff you learn and acquire, that can't hurt with your prose because you're taking everything you learn and sort of putting it into your art. So
For
I
sure.
feel like going at it from the editorial perspective will teach me more about writing, and then putting out the book of someone else will teach me about kind of the audience stuff. So I'm excited for it.
Well, that's great. Well, that's great. Well, congratulations. I think I was aware of Nictitating Books before I knew you. So I'm happy to know you, and I'm happy to know that imprint, and I think it's great. So well done.
Thank you. I mean, it's a lot of hurry up and wait, and it's admittedly very stressful because I'm like, all right, like like no matter what, you're not going to be putting out a book every 2 months. I mean, at least I'm
Right.
not. I don't have the budget for that. So it's like a lot of hurry up and wait where it's like, you do a crowdfunding, you rush to get all that done, and you're doing all this work, and then you get a little bit of money, and then you're just sort of waiting. And it's
Right.
like, that's just how it works. Like,
It is how it works. I'm talking to a press about my second novel, and it looks like they're going to say yes, even though I don't have a contract yet. But even if they say yes tomorrow, it won't come out until like 2022 almost. You
yeah,
know what
that
I mean?
sounds about right. Yeah.
It's a long process. So hurry up and wait sounds about right.
Yeah, because it's like, I already have 2021 like basically booked up, and like I picked the writers out and I talked to them, and I got contract signed, and it's like now we're in the like editorial / waiting for first drafts stage, which is new to me because it's like on my end, I'm used to the writing stage where it's like I do all this work and then I'm waiting on the publisher, where well
Right.
now I'm the publisher waiting on the writer, so it's similar but it's different.
Well, it must be nice though to not have to worry about that rejection. It's
That is,
like,
I think, the best part is like,
yeah,
I'm going to try my best with all my writers and all my books. But if the book doesn't do well, it's like, it's not really the same feeling as when I put out my own book and if it doesn't do well. Because if I do my own book, there's much more of a personal feeling of rejection. Where if it's someone else's, I can sort of look at it in the way you should look at it with everything. But, in a more rational, like, well, okay, like it hasn't taken off yet. We can try this and that. And, you know, so
do
I think
your
there's a little less pressure in terms of that.
do your authors push you in terms of like, okay, Sean, what's happening with my book and what's the
One of them
market?
does. I mean, it's kind
What are
of
you going
funny
to
because
do?
it's like I have, and it's, I think that's one of the big learning experiences too, is you can get very myopic just being a writer. You're like, this is how I work. This is the pace I work. And you sort of, other people don't work at that pace, but you don't really realize it until you're working with other writers and you realize like, oh, everyone really does work at their own pace. Like I got
Right.
one writer who's like, I was like, all right, so and it's 2021 and it was just like, here you go. And I'm like, oh my God, you're done with the draft already? um, and then the other writer is sort of more of the perfectionist side. And like, I really want to take my time and, so it's like, it's just learning also like what other people's kind of output is and their scheduling is like. And so it's really interesting stuff.
It's hard from the writer's side because it's your entire life, but from the publisher side, it's only like one of a dozen or half a dozen writers and projects you're working with and deadlines. So you're basically like, yeah, I'll get to you when I get to you. But the writer is like knocking on your door saying, this is my life. We have to
No,
get it
I
out.
mean, I get it. And I'm glad I think having been a writer and still being a writer is going to help me at least with the patience to be like, I know what it's like. And I know the kind of like, oh, hurry up and tell me type of stuff. So
Yeah. Yeah. The desperation of having years of work in somebody's hands and please do a good job with my life.
I
I,
know. And that is the hard thing too, is like, it's also learning how not personal it is a lot of the time. Like I get people messaging me now, like, hey, I have this idea for a story or a novel. And I just have to be like, thank you for thinking of the press, but I'm not interested. And it's not a personal thing. It's almost
yeah.
never a personal thing. It's just subjectively, this is sort of what I'm into, and I'm not really looking for the thing you have right now.
Yeah, it's weird too because a lot of it's like about scheduling and you've already got your roster full and no matter how good it is, you can't take it
Yeah, I mean,
on.
I totally get now because, before I even started the press, I would get a little annoyed when I'd talk to a publisher and they'd be like, oh, I'm already booked for the year. And I'd be like, what do you mean? But now that I have a press, I'm like, oh, it's very easy to book a full year in like a month.
I'm sure. The ones I'm working with is Journal Stone and they're putting out about a book a month. They're really working hard on that and my hat's off to them. I don't see how they do it, honestly.
I mean,
Just
I'm probably going to, at least for the next few years, 3 books tops, and even that is going to be a lot of work, I think.
I know. I mean, the editing, all of it is just insane. I don't see how they do it, honestly. I know Scarlett works really hard, but it must be a lot of stress at the same time, just having to juggle so many projects and so many deadlines and so many little details, the covers and the blurbs and the this and that. I mean, it just goes on and on,
Yeah, I mean, there's so much stuff to putting out a book that I don't know, so much little stuff that I don't know that everybody realizes. Like, there are little things like you get your cover art and it's all done, and then you try to submit it to the whoever's printing the book, and then they're like, well, this thing is off by half a centimeter or whatever, so you have to resubmit it, so you got to re-talk to the artist and be like, this is what they told me, I don't even really understand it, but can you reformat it? And it's like little things like that, like constantly.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's why, like in the film business, it's kind of a truism that as long as you're nice to work with, as long as you're a nice person and you're patient and you're generous, you'll go farther than if you're this impatient asshole. And I think it's true because it's like, there's so many little snafus in the process that as long as people are happy to get your email and your email kind of brightens their day a little bit, that goes a long way. Just be nice and I mean, everybody's having a hard time. They're working so hard and there's so much stress and, there's not a ton of money in this industry. So people are half broke anyway. And so it's always nice to just be nice, man, be a good person and just say, how's it going? How are you doing? And I think that makes a big difference in terms of how quickly they get back to you and how quickly your project gets accepted versus some guy who's really hard to work with and really demanding and really choosy about this and that, and so I think there's a lot to be said for just being a nice person
No,
these
it's
days.
it's true, and one thing that's been sort of eye opening, I guess, bringing it back, and we should finish up pretty soon because this is going to be one of my longer episodes. But uh, just out of curiosity, I've been watching some interviews with screenwriters, producers, that sort of stuff, just because I haven't written a script in a while, and I'm just kind of curious about it. And I'll go down rabbit holes of like, oh, what is this like? And one eye-opening thing for me was just that it's the same way in the film industry to an extent. Like, if you're a nice, relaxed, kind of patient person, people want to work with you more.
Yeah.
Which which you wouldn't necessarily think in the film industry because there are so many egos and it is such a big money industry.
Yeah.
But I guess it's the same thing where it's like, yeah, no one wants to work with the guy that's like, where the fuck is my answer on my thing? People will be like, yeah, okay, I can work with 1,000 other people that aren't going to be a dick.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. I mean, even really talented, brilliant people, their phone isn't ringing so much if they're just a total dick. And you spend so much time with those people on set that you really want to work with somebody who's fun and nice. And so, yeah, the people who are nice, they get the phone calls, and the people who are dicks, they don't get the phone calls. So
Yeah, so you heard it here first. Be nice. I try to be nice. Sometimes I'm not, but
be a nice person.
working on it, character flaws and all that. But okay, so we're getting near the end of the show. I always end these episodes, interviews, with something I like to call the random ass interview segment. Essentially, I come up with a question that's relatively random, and ideally it's not related to anything, though it's kind of hard to not do anything not related to anything. And then I ask you some weird questions.
Cool.
All right. Did you ever have a favorite blanket as a child?
I did.
Okay. I mean, what color was it?
It's not very interesting, but I'll tell you. It was a quilt my great aunt, who was sort of my grandmother, but she was my great aunt. She made for me, and I can remember being just the tiniest little thing, drooling on this blanket, looking at these little hand stitched little nursery type animals, like little rabbits and stuff. And so, yeah, it's probably one of my very first memories, actually.
That's cool.
Yeah,
Huh.
it's kind of random, Sean.
Well, that's the whole point. Do you like hats?
Yeah, I like hats. I've got a big old head. So there's that. But yeah, hats are cool. I don't mind hats.
All right.
Do good if you're in the sun,
That's
particularly.
true. They are good for sun protection.
Yeah.
Um,
I worked out in El Paso on a shoot a couple of years back, and man, you wouldn't believe how quickly you got dehydrated.
oh,
Like you're in
I live in Santa Fe now, so I would. I mean,
it's like fucking hardcore, man. Like 10 minutes, you could feel like it was like a headache coming on. So
yeah, no,
people
I mean that's.
in
I live
business,
in
you
Santa
were
Fe where it's not only that type of dryness, it's like 6,000 feet elevation.
yeah,
So it really is like anytime my parents come to visit or anybody, they're from sea level or whatever, they're just like, I have a headache. Like, why am I so tired walking? And I have to be like, it's the elevation. And then they're like, why do I feel dehydrated? I'm like, because it's so dry that you don't even sweat. Like, it'll come
yeah,
out and
I can
immediately
really
dry
feel
so you
it.
won't realize.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It is pretty crazy.
You live in Santa Fe?
Let's see.
You
What's your favorite part about where you live in North Carolina?
yeah, I live in the mountains of North Carolina, in Western North Carolina, in Asheville, where the Biltmore famously is in the mountains. As a matter of fact, I can look out my front window and see the Biltmore. Um, but yeah, so I love it. It's very mountainous, very wooded. We have bears, lots of wildlife, and so it's a great place to live. Hard to make a living here though. It's basically a small tourist town.
Well, yeah, I would imagine that's true.
If you want a real job, good luck.
Yeah, seriously. Well, I'm thinking that's gonna wrap this up. Thank you so much for coming on. Before I end the episode entirely, do you have anything you want to promote? Do you want to talk about the occultists?
No, I think we covered the occultists. Just I will say, please check out the occultists. It's getting great reviews. Everybody who's read it has told me it's one of the best books they've ever read. And obviously, I love it. But I put everything I had into it. And so please check out the occultists, and please check out some of the other journal stone writers. There's a great book I've got my eye on right now called The Americans by
Oh, that's
Jeffrey.
Jeffrey Thomas, right? Yeah.
And that book just I haven't read it yet, but I can't wait to get it. I've got my eye on it. It just looks so gorgeous, and I'm just ready to read it right now. It's like a big plate of food you just want to dive into. So that's a book I'd like to talk about once I've read it.
Well, I mean, yeah. I think that's the first time someone's promoted someone else's book during the plug segment. So right
Well,
on with
Jeffrey's
that.
been really nice to me. Jeffrey plugged my book on another podcast recently, and it was just the nicest thing. And I'm a pretty aggressive Facebooker and social media person because I live in a remote area, and it's kind of the way I network.
Yeah.
And Jeffrey's just been really, really nice guy, especially for someone of his stature who he's done a lot of great work. I mean, he came up with Punktown, and
Yeah.
just good work. He's been working really great for a decade or more, and for him to be nice to me, who's basically a debut novelist, just was really touching to me. So I'm one of those fools who tries to pay it forward and pay it backwards if I need to. And
Hey,
so,
there's
so
nothing wrong with that.
yeah, no, you got to do that. We're all in this together. This is a pretty small little subculture. And, so yeah, I really want to help out anybody I can help out. So yeah, he's been really great to me.
Nice. So I'll do my end of it. Nictitating books. The first book from Nictitating Books, Screaming Creatures, is my first full-length collection. Me, Sean M. Thompson. I've also been getting, very lovely reviews and praise about the book, which is nice. I mean, it's nice to have something that I worked on and worked fairly hard on, and to have people receive it positively.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so
Book is
that's available now in ebook and print book. And if you like it, please leave a review on Goodreads or Amazon. And as stated earlier, we're having books from Paula Ashe and Maxwell Bauman coming out. I don't have an exact date for anyone yet, but ideally sometime in end of 2020, sometime in 2021. Well, anyway, again, thanks for coming on, Polly.
Yeah, well, thank you, Sean. I really appreciate you having me. Great show you have here.
Thank you. Yeah, this has been fun. It's been one of my more enjoyable episodes. I love being able to talk shop with someone who's kind of been multidisciplinary in terms of the what they've written. So that's really
Yeah,
cool.
well, thank you.
Um, and yeah, everybody stay tuned. We're going to have a lot more interviews with a lot of talented and interesting genre authors. So until then, keep it spooky.